In the heart of a bustling high school where the hallways buzzed with chatter and lockers slammed like drumbeats, there was one name everyone knew: Marcus Carter. Known as the Beast on the basketball court, Marcus wasn't just a player, he was a phenomenon. Standing tall with broad shoulders and muscles that seemed sculpted for victory, he commanded attention wherever he went. His teammates idolized him, his opponents feared him, and even teachers gave him a wide berth. But behind the trophies and accolades lay a streak of arrogance that often clouded his better judgment. Marcus thrived on being the center of attention. Whether it was sinking three-pointers during games or strutting down the hallway like he owned the place, he made sure no one forgot who he was. And why wouldn't he? For years, life had handed him everything on a silver platter: popularity, talent, and an unshakable sense of superiority. He believed he was untouchable, almost invincible. But sometimes, fate has a way of humbling even the mightiest. One afternoon, the cafeteria was alive with its usual chaos. The smell of greasy fries mingled with the sound of laughter and clattering trays. Students huddled in groups, sharing stories, gossiping, or scrolling through their phones. In one corner sat Zara Thompson, a quiet yet striking presence. She wasn't part of the loud cliques or the drama-filled circles. Instead, she preferred keeping to herself and her close-knit group of friends. With her nose usually buried in books or her mind focused on her next karate tournament, Zara rarely sought the spotlight. Yet she carried an aura of quiet confidence that intrigued those around her. On this particular day, Zara and her friends were laughing about something silly, a meme one of them had shown on their phone. Their giggles cut through the noise of the cafeteria like wind chimes in a storm. Across the room, Marcus glanced up from his conversation with his teammates. His sharp eyes narrowed as he zeroed in on Zara's table. To him, their laughter sounded mocking, directed at him. Never one to back down from a perceived challenge, Marcus felt a surge of irritation. "Who do they think they are?" he muttered, under his breath, his fists clenching instinctively. Without giving it much thought, Marcus stood up, towering over the tables like a giant ready to pounce. His teammates exchanged glances, some smirking, while others looked uneasy. They'd seen this side of Marcus before, the side that didn't tolerate disrespect, real or imagined. As he strode toward Zara's table, the room seemed to grow quieter, the air thick with anticipation. People stopped eating mid-bite, turning their heads to see what would happen next. Zara, oblivious to the brewing tension, continued chatting with her friends. Her calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to the storm approaching her. When Marcus finally reached her table, his shadow loomed large over her petite frame. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Everyone waited, holding their breath, wondering how this unexpected encounter would play out. Little did Marcus know, he was about to face someone far more formidable than he could have ever anticipated. Marcus planted himself firmly in front of Zara's table, his towering frame casting a shadow over the group of girls. The cafeteria, once alive with chatter and laughter, had grown eerily quiet. All eyes were on him now, watching as he slammed his fist down on the table with enough force to make the plastic trays jump. Drinks spilled, and Zara's friends flinched, their laughter dying instantly. The sudden shift in atmosphere was palpable, like the calm before a storm. "What's so funny?" Marcus barked, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. His dark eyes locked onto Zara, who sat perfectly still, her expression unreadable. He jabbed a finger in her direction, his tone dripping with accusation. "You think it's funny laughing at me?" Zara blinked, her brow furrowing slightly as she processed his words. She tilted her head, studying him with an almost curious gaze. Then, without missing a beat, she replied, "I don't even know your name." Her voice was calm, almost casual, as if she were discussing the weather rather than confronting someone twice her size. The response caught Marcus off guard, but only for a moment. To him, her cool demeanor felt like mockery, a challenge disguised as indifference. His face reddened, not just from embarrassment, but from anger bubbling beneath the surface. How dare she act like he was insignificant? He was Marcus Carter, the star of the basketball team, the guy everyone talked about, The one who always got his way. You're gonna regret messing with me, Marcus growled, his voice low and menacing. Before anyone could react, he reached out and grabbed Zara's arm, pulling her roughly to her feet. His grip was firm, his fingers digging into her skin as if trying to assert dominance. Around them, gasps rippled through the crowd. Some students exchanged nervous glances while others pulled out their phones to record the scene unfolding before them. Zara winced slightly at the pressure but didn't struggle or cry out. Instead, she looked directly at Marcus, her dark eyes meeting his with a steely intensity that made him hesitate for a split second. "Let go of me," she said, her tone unchanged, calm, measured, and devoid of fear. It wasn't a plea. It was a command. But Marcus didn't listen. In his mind, letting go would mean backing down, and backing down wasn't an option. Not for him. Not in front of everyone. With a sneer, he tightened his grip, yanking her closer. "You need to learn some respect," he snarled, his voice loud enough for the entire cafeteria to hear. What Marcus failed to realize, however, was that Zara wasn't like the others. While most people might have cowered or tried to escape, Zara stood her ground. Years of martial arts training had taught her more than just how to defend herself. It had instilled in her a deep sense of confidence and control. She didn't need to raise her voice or throw punches to prove her strength. But when pushed too far, she knew exactly what to do. As Marcus continued to hold on to her arm, oblivious to the danger he was courting, Zara took a slow, deliberate breath. Her body language shifted ever so slightly, her muscles tensing like a coiled spring. To the untrained eye, she still appeared calm and composed. But those who knew her well could see it. The subtle shift in focus, the flicker of determination in her eyes. Whatever happened next, Marcus wouldn't see it coming. The tension in the room was electric, every student leaning forward in anticipation. No one dared to intervene, frozen by a mix of fear and fascination. For Marcus, this was supposed to be a display of power, a chance to remind everyone why they should never cross him. But little did he know, he was about to learn a lesson he wouldn't soon forget. As Marcus tightened his grip on Zara's arm, something remarkable happened. The calm and collected demeanor that Zara had maintained until now shifted ever so slightly. But it was enough to make those watching hold their breath. Her lips pressed into a thin line and her dark eyes hardened, flickering with a quiet fire that hadn't been there before. It was as if a switch had flipped inside her, transforming her from an unassuming girl into someone far more formidable. "Let go of me," Zara repeated, her voice steady but laced with steel this time. There was no pleading in her tone, no trace of fear, just a clear warning. But Marcus didn't listen. He smirked, thinking her words were empty threats. To him, she was just another student, someone who wouldn't dare stand up to him. His confidence blinded him to the reality of the situation. He had underestimated her completely. Without hesitation, Zara twisted her wrist sharply, using a technique she'd practiced countless times during martial arts training. With surprising ease, she broke free from his grasp, leaving Marcus stunned for a brief moment. How could someone so small move with such precision? Before he could process what had happened, Zara stepped forward, closing the distance between them. She moved deliberately, her posture poised and controlled, like a predator sizing up its prey. The crowd around them erupted into murmurs, excitement rippling through the cafeteria. Phones were held high, recording every second of the confrontation. Some students cheered quietly under their breath, while others exchanged wide-eyed glances, unable to believe what they were witnessing. This wasn't supposed to happen, not to Marcus Carter. He was the untouchable star athlete, the guy who always came out on top. Yet here he was, facing off against someone who clearly wasn't intimidated by his size or reputation. Zara wasted no time. As Marcus lunged toward her again, trying to regain control of the situation, she sidestepped him effortlessly. Then, with fluid grace, she swept her leg behind his, knocking him off balance. The entire cafeteria seemed to freeze as Marcus stumbled backward, arms flailing wildly as he tried and failed to steady himself. For a split second, he looked almost comical, like a giant tree swaying precariously in the wind. And then, With a thud that echoed through the room, he crashed to the floor. Gasps filled the air as students leaned closer, their phones capturing every angle of the spectacle. Marcus lay sprawled on the ground, dazed and humiliated, staring up at Zara in disbelief. She stood over him, her stance relaxed but commanding, radiating an aura of quiet authority. Without saying a word, she planted one foot firmly on his chest, pinning him down with effortless strength. The symbolism of the moment wasn't lost on anyone. Here was Marcus, the self-proclaimed king of the school, brought low by someone half his size. For a few seconds, the only sound in the cafeteria was the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Everyone waited, holding their collective breath, unsure of what Zara would do next. Would she say something cutting? Deliver another blow to drive home her point? Instead, she simply looked down at Marcus, her expression unreadable. "Had enough?" she asked calmly, her voice carrying just enough edge to send a chill down his spine. Marcus struggled beneath her foot, his face burning with shame and frustration. He wanted to lash out, to reclaim some semblance of dignity, but he quickly realized it was futile. No matter how hard he pushed against her, she didn't budge. She was stronger than she looked, smarter than he'd given her credit for, and far more composed than he could ever hope to be in that moment. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the occasional whisper or giggle from the audience. For Marcus, the weight of the situation began to sink in. He wasn't just losing this fight, he was being humiliated in front of the entire school. Slowly, reluctantly, he stammered, Get off me." His voice lacked its usual bravado, replaced instead by a mixture of anger and desperation. Zara didn't respond immediately. She stood there for a moment longer, letting the gravity of the situation settle over him, and over everyone else watching. Then, with a final glance of quiet triumph, she lifted her foot and stepped back, giving Marcus space to scramble to his feet. The message was clear. She had won, not because she wanted to prove a point, but because she refused to be bullied. And as Marcus stumbled away, red-faced and defeated, the cafeteria erupted into a mix of cheers, applause, and hushed whispers. The moment Zara stepped back, allowing Marcus to scramble to his feet, the cafeteria erupted into a cacophony of reactions. Some students clapped and cheered, their voices echoing through the room like waves crashing against a shore. Others whispered furiously, their eyes darting between Zara and Marcus as if trying to piece together what had just happened. Phones were still held high, capturing every angle of the scene, ensuring that this moment would live on far beyond the walls of the school. Marcus, red-faced and disheveled, looked around at the crowd with a mix of anger and humiliation. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by an uncharacteristic vulnerability. He wiped his palms on his jeans, trying to regain some semblance of composure, but it was clear he was shaken. For years, he had built his reputation on being untouchable, on being the guy no one dared to challenge. Yet here he was, defeated, not by brute force or sheer size, but by someone who seemed to embody everything he lacked: calmness, control, and quiet strength. Zara, on the other hand, remained unfazed. She brushed off her sleeves as though nothing out of the ordinary had occurred, her movements deliberate and unhurried. Her friends rushed to her side, their faces a mix of awe and concern. "Are you okay?" one of them asked, glancing nervously at Marcus, who was now standing awkwardly a few feet away. Zara nodded, offering a small smile. "I'm fine," she said simply, her voice steady. "He's the one who needs to figure out what just happened." Teachers finally arrived on the scene, drawn by the commotion. Mr. Henderson, the vice principal, pushed his way through the crowd, his face a mask of stern authority. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his sharp gaze sweeping over the students. When no one answered immediately, he turned to Marcus, who was still struggling to compose himself. "Carter, care to explain?" Marcus opened his mouth to speak but hesitated. How could he possibly justify his actions without sounding even more foolish than he already felt? Instead, he muttered something incoherent, avoiding eye contact with both the teacher and Zara. Mr. Henderson sighed heavily before turning to Zara. "Miss Thompson, can you tell me what happened?" Zara took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. Marcus came over to our table and accused us of laughing at him, she began, her tone measured and factual. When I told him I didn't even know his name, he grabbed my arm. I asked him to let go, but he wouldn't listen, so I defended myself. She shrugged slightly, as if the explanation was as simple as that, and in many ways it was. The vice principal frowned, clearly torn between disciplining both parties and acknowledging that Zara had acted in self-defense. Several students nearby chimed in, eager to share their perspectives. "She didn't do anything wrong," one boy called out. "He attacked her first," added another. The chorus of voices grew louder, making it impossible for Mr. Henderson to ignore the overwhelming consensus. Marcus had crossed a line, and Zara had merely responded accordingly. As the teachers ushered Marcus and Zara out of the cafeteria to discuss the incident further, the crowd slowly dispersed, buzzing with excitement. Videos of the altercation were already being shared online, captioned with phrases like, "When the basketball captain picked the wrong girl," and "Never underestimate a quiet person." By the end of the day, the story had spread throughout the school, and beyond. For Marcus, the aftermath was brutal. Rumors swirled about how he'd been taken down by someone half his size, and his teammates avoided meeting his gaze during practice. Even his closest friends struggled to look him in the eye, unsure of how to reconcile the image of their invincible leader with the humiliated figure they'd witnessed in the cafeteria. Meanwhile, Zara returned to her usual routine as if nothing had changed. She continued attending classes, chatting with her friends, and focusing on her studies, seemingly unaffected by the attention. But while Zara appeared unfazed, the impact of her actions rippled through the school in ways she hadn't anticipated. Students who had previously admired Marcus began to see him in a different light, not just as a talented athlete, but as someone whose arrogance often overshadowed his better qualities. And Zara? She became something of a legend, not because she sought fame, but because she had stood up for herself when it mattered most. By the time the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed the cafeteria incident felt like a whirlwind for everyone involved. For Marcus, life at school became a series of uncomfortable moments. Whispers trailed him wherever he went, and the once reverent glances from his peers had turned into awkward stares. Some students avoided him altogether, while others snickered behind their hands when he passed by. The phrase "don't mess with Zara" became a quiet mantra among the student body, a reminder of what happened when arrogance met its match. Marcus tried to brush it off at first, pretending none of it bothered him. He strutted through the hallways as if nothing had changed, but those who knew him well could see cracks forming in his armor. His confident swagger wasn't as pronounced, and his usual boisterous laughter during lunch felt forced. Even on the basketball court, where he had always shown brightest, his performance began to falter. Opposing teams taunted him with chants inspired by the viral video of Zara pinning him down. "Pick on someone your own size," they'd yell, eliciting cheers from the crowd. It was clear that Marcus's reputation, once untouchable, was now tarnished, and he had no one to blame but himself. For Zara, life returned to normal almost immediately. She didn't seek out attention or revel in her newfound fame. Instead, she carried herself with the same quiet dignity she always had. Her friends, however, couldn't help but gush about what had happened. "You were amazing," one of them said during study hall. "I can't believe you took him down like that." Zara simply shrugged, brushing off the praise. "He shouldn't have grabbed me," she replied matter-of-factly. "It's not about being tough. It's about standing up for yourself." Despite her humility, curiosity about Zara grew exponentially. Students who barely knew her before suddenly wanted to sit with her at lunch or strike up conversations in the hallway. Rumors spread about her background. Some claimed she was secretly a black belt in multiple martial arts disciplines, while others speculated she trained with professional fighters. A few brave souls even asked her directly, but Zara remained tight-lipped, offering only vague responses like, "Let's just say I've been training for a long time." Teachers and administrators also found themselves caught up in the aftermath. Mr. Henderson, the vice principal, called both Marcus and Zara into his office several times to discuss the incident further. While there was no denying that Marcus had initiated the confrontation, the school faced pressure to address the situation fairly. In the end, Marcus was assigned 2 weeks of detention and required to attend anger management sessions. Zara, meanwhile, faced no disciplinary action, a decision supported by witnesses and backed by evidence showing she acted purely in self-defense. Outside of school, the story gained traction online. Clips of the altercation were shared across social media platforms, sparking debates about respect, assumptions, and the importance of standing up for oneself. Some commenters praised Zara for handling the situation so calmly and effectively, while others criticized Marcus for letting his ego get the better of him. Local news outlets picked up the story, dubbing it the takedown heard round the school, and interviewing anonymous students who described Zara as humble but fearless. Amid all the chaos, Zara stayed focused on her goals. She continued, excelling in her classes, participated in extracurricular activities, and spent weekends honing her martial arts skills. To her, the incident in the cafeteria was just another chapter in her life, not something to dwell on or define her. Still, she couldn't ignore the impact it had on those around her. Friends confided in her, saying how inspired they were by her courage. Strangers approached her to thank her for setting an example of strength and resilience. As for Marcus, the fallout forced him to confront parts of himself he'd long ignored. Sitting in anger management sessions, he began reflecting on his behavior, not just toward Zara, but toward others as well. He realized how often he'd used his size and status to intimidate people, assuming they would never challenge him. The cafeteria incident had shattered that illusion, leaving him humbled and, in some ways, grateful. Grateful because, though painful, it gave him an opportunity to grow. By the end of the week, the buzz around the incident started to die down, replaced by other distractions typical of high school life. But the lessons learned from that day lingered, etched into the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. For Marcus, it was a wake-up call. For Zara, it was proof that staying true to oneself could inspire others. And for the rest of the school, it was a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and sometimes the quietest voices carry the most power. Weeks passed, and the initial frenzy surrounding the cafeteria incident began to fade. Yet its ripple effects continued to shape the lives of those involved, and even those who weren't. Marcus, in particular, found himself grappling with emotions he hadn't anticipated: regret, shame, and a deep desire to make amends. Sitting alone on the bleachers after basketball practice one evening, he replayed the scene in his mind for what felt like the 100th time. The way Zara had looked at him, not with anger or hatred, but with calm resolve, stayed etched in his memory. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd misjudged her entirely. At first, Marcus tried to convince himself it didn't matter. "She's just one person," he muttered under his breath as he dribbled the ball absent-mindedly. But no matter how hard he tried to dismiss the incident, the truth gnawed at him. He knew he'd been wrong, not just in grabbing Zara's arm, but in assuming she was someone who would back down. His arrogance had blinded him, and now he was paying the price, not just through detention or online ridicule, but through the loss of respect from his peers. One afternoon, as Marcus walked home from school, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was another comment on the video of the altercation, this one saying, "He'll never learn." Those 4 words hit him harder than any insult before. Was that how people saw him? As someone incapable of change? The thought unsettled him, more than he cared to admit. That night, lying awake in bed, Marcus made a decision. He needed to fix things. Not because he wanted to save face, but because it was the right thing to do. The next day, Marcus approached Zara after class. She was standing near her locker, flipping through the pages of a notebook. Her friends were nearby, chatting animatedly, but they quieted when they noticed Marcus approaching. For a moment, all eyes were on him again, just like in the cafeteria. Marcus swallowed hard, his palms sweating as he stopped a few feet away. "Can I talk to you?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. Zara looked up, her expression unreadable. She studied him for a second before nodding slightly. "Sure," she said, closing her notebook and stepping aside so they could speak privately. Her friends lingered, hesitantly, but Zara gave them a reassuring glance, signaling that everything was fine. Marcus took a deep breath, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. "Look, I'm sorry," he began, his words tumbling out faster than he intended. "I shouldn't have grabbed you. I shouldn't have assumed you were laughing at me. I acted like an idiot." He paused, searching her face for any sign of reaction. When she didn't respond immediately, he added, "I know I messed up. Big time." For a long moment, Zara simply stared at him, her dark eyes thoughtful. Then slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she said finally. The simplicity of her response caught Marcus off guard. He had expected resistance, maybe even anger. Instead, she seemed almost understanding. "I get why you're apologizing," Zara continued, her tone calm but firm. "But let me ask you something. Why did you think it was okay to put your hands on me in the first place?" Her question struck Marcus like a punch to the gut. He blinked, taken aback by its directness. I don't know," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I guess I thought I could handle it, that I didn't need to listen." Zara raised an eyebrow, her gaze piercing. "That's the problem," she said. "You didn't listen. And not just to me, to anyone who doesn't fit into your idea of what's important. You think being strong means overpowering people, but real strength is knowing when to step back." Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He realized then that this wasn't just about apologizing, it was about learning, about becoming better. "I want to change," he said earnestly. "I don't want to be that guy anymore." To his relief, Zara offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Good," she said. "Because trust me, nobody wants to see you fail. We just want to see you grow." As they parted ways, Marcus felt a weight lift off his shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a start. And for the first time in weeks, he felt hopeful, not just about rebuilding his reputation, but about proving to himself that he could be more than the person he'd been in that cafeteria. The weeks that followed Marcus's apology marked a turning point, not just for him, but for the entire school. Word of his genuine attempt to make amends spread quickly, thanks in part to Zara's friends, who quietly shared the story with their own circles. While some students remained skeptical, others began to see Marcus in a new light. His teammates noticed he was less aggressive during practice, more willing to listen to feedback, and even offered encouragement to younger players. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but small changes added up over time. For Marcus, the journey toward self-improvement wasn't easy. The anger management sessions forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about himself, how often he'd relied on intimidation rather than communication, how quick he was to assume the worst in others, and how rarely he paused to consider someone else's perspective. At first, he resisted the exercises, rolling his eyes at role-playing scenarios or journaling prompts. But as the weeks went on, something shifted. He started opening up, sharing stories from his childhood and admitting how much pressure he felt to live up to his untouchable reputation. Slowly, he began to understand that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was strength. Zara, meanwhile, continued to inspire those around her without seeking recognition. She didn't hold a grudge against Marcus and never once gloated about what had happened. Instead, she carried herself with quiet grace, letting her actions speak louder than words. Friends joked that she was becoming a local celebrity, pointing out how strangers would approach her in the hallway to thank her for standing up to Marcus. Zara always responded humbly, saying things like, "I just did what anyone should do. Stand up for themselves." One day, during a school assembly focused on leadership and character, the principal surprised everyone by inviting both Marcus and Zara to share their perspectives. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation as the two took the stage, sitting side by side under the bright lights. For a moment, neither spoke, and the silence stretched taut like a drum. Then Marcus leaned forward, gripping the microphone tightly. "I'm not gonna lie," he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "What happened between me and Zara taught me a lot about myself, and not all of it was good. I used to think being strong meant being tough, being in control, but I learned that real strength is knowing when to step back, when to listen, and when to say sorry." He glanced at Zara briefly before continuing. "I made a mistake, and I won't make excuses for it. All I can do is try to be better, and I hope people give me a chance to prove that." Applause erupted throughout the auditorium, filling the space with warmth and support. When the clapping subsided, Zara took the microphone. Unlike Marcus, she didn't delve into personal reflections or emotional appeals. Instead, she kept her message simple and powerful. Standing up for yourself isn't about proving you're stronger than someone else. It's about showing respect for yourself and for others. We all have the power to choose how we respond to challenges, whether it's through kindness, patience, or action. That's what true strength looks like. Her words resonated deeply, earning another round of applause. As they left the stage together, Marcus turned to Zara and grinned sheepishly. "You're way better at speeches than I am," he said. Zara chuckled softly, shaking her head. "It's not about being perfect," she replied. "It's about being honest." In the months that followed, Marcus worked tirelessly to rebuild trust and earn back respect. He volunteered for community service projects, mentored younger students, and became more inclusive in his interactions. Though some of his old habits lingered, he was committed to change, reminding himself daily of the lessons he'd learned. Zara, meanwhile, remained a pillar of quiet strength, inspiring others simply by being herself. By graduation, the cafeteria incident had become less of a cautionary tale and more of a story of growth and redemption. Students remembered Marcus, not for his arrogance, but for his humility and determination to improve. And Zara? She was celebrated not just for her martial arts skills, but for her unwavering integrity and compassion. Together, their unlikely connection reminded everyone that mistakes could lead to meaningful change, if only we're brave enough to face them. By the time graduation rolled around, the story of Marcus and Zara had become a defining moment in the history of their high school. It wasn't just gossip or drama anymore. It was a lesson etched into the collective memory of everyone who had witnessed it. The cafeteria incident, once a fleeting scandal, evolved into something far greater, a symbol of resilience, accountability, and the power of second chances. On graduation day, as students filed into the auditorium dressed in caps and gowns, there was an undeniable buzz in the air. Friends hugged tearfully, parents snapped photos, and teachers exchanged proud smiles. But for Marcus and Zara, the ceremony carried extra weight. They sat on opposite sides of the room, surrounded by their respective circles, yet the connection between them lingered subtly in the atmosphere. When names were called alphabetically to receive diplomas, both walked across the stage with quiet confidence. Marcus greeted by polite applause, Zara met with enthusiastic cheers. During the valedictorian speech, the speaker, a soft-spoken senior named Emily, reflected on the challenges and triumphs of their class. "We've all faced moments that tested us," she said, her voice echoing through the hall. "Moments where we had to choose between pride and humility, fear and courage. And while some of those moments may have been hard to live through, they shaped us into who we are today." Though she didn't mention Marcus or Zara by name, the implication was clear. Students exchanged knowing glances, nodding silently in agreement. After the ceremony, families spilled onto the football field outside, celebrating under the warm afternoon sun. Marcus spotted Zara standing near the bleachers, posing for pictures with her family. Summoning his courage, he approached her, his diploma tucked neatly under one arm. "Hey," he said, offering a tentative smile. "Congratulations." Zara turned, her expression lighting up with genuine warmth. "Thanks," she replied. You too. There was no trace of tension between them now, only mutual respect. After a brief pause, Marcus added, I know I've said this before, but thank you. For everything. You didn't have to accept my apology, but you did, and that meant a lot. Zara shrugged modestly, brushing off his gratitude with a small laugh. Like I said before, it's not about holding grudges. It's about moving forward. She paused, then added with a playful smirk. Besides, watching you grow has been kind of inspiring. Marcus chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. Well, if anyone ever writes a book about me, I hope they include the part where I learned not to mess with martial arts champions. Their conversation ended with a shared laugh, but its impact lingered. Nearby, classmates watched the exchange with admiration. Some even joked about turning the story into a movie, casting Marcus as the brash antagonist turned hero, and Zara as the unassuming yet unstoppable protagonist. It was clear that their journey had left a lasting impression, one that transcended cliques, rivalries, and stereotypes. Years later, alumni gatherings would still bring up the infamous cafeteria showdown. Newer students heard the tale from upperclassmen, each retelling adding a layer of legend to the story. Teachers used it as an example in assemblies, emphasizing the importance of respecting others and owning up to mistakes. Even local newspapers revisited the incident during feature stories on successful graduates, highlighting how both Marcus and Zara had gone on to achieve great things. For Marcus, life after high school was a testament to growth. He pursued a degree in sports management, channeling his competitive spirit into coaching youth teams. His players admired him not just for his knowledge of the game, but for his emphasis on teamwork, empathy, and integrity. He often credited Zara for teaching him the value of humility, though he never mentioned her name publicly. Sometimes, he'd tell his team, you learn the most important lessons from the people you least expect. As for Zara, she continued to break barriers wherever she went. She earned a scholarship to a prestigious university, where she studied psychology and became an advocate for self-defense education among young women. Her calm demeanor and fierce determination inspired countless others to stand up for themselves, not out of aggression, but out of self-respect. When asked about the cafeteria incident during interviews, she always responded with grace. It wasn't about winning or losing, she'd say. It was about reminding people that assumptions can be dangerous, and that strength comes in many forms. In the end, the legacy of Marcus and Zara wasn't just about what happened that day in the cafeteria. It was about the ripple effects of their actions, the way one moment of confrontation sparked transformation, unity, and understanding. Their story served as a reminder that everyone makes mistakes, but true character is defined by how we rise from them. And so, long after they had left the halls of their high school behind, the tale of the basketball captain and the wrong girl lived on, not as a cautionary tale, but as a beacon of hope.